In a small, peaceful village called Umuigbo, where the sun kissed the earth with warmth and the birds sang sweet melodies every morning, life was simple and calm. The people of Umuigbo were known for their kindness, but also for their caution when it came to strangers. One day, something strange happened that changed everything. The villagers were busy in the fields, tending to their crops and herding their animals, when a stranger appeared on the dirt path that led into the village. He was tall, wearing a dusty hat, and carried a small bag over his shoulder. But what was most unusual about him wasn't his height or his bag. It was the fact that as he walked under the bright midday sun, he cast no shadow. Children playing nearby noticed it first. Little Chinelo, a curious girl of 10, tugged on her brother's arm and whispered, "Look. That man, he has no shadow." Her brother, Obi, squinted his eyes, and sure enough, Chinelo was right. The man walked confidently, yet not a single outline of his figure touched the ground. Obi quickly gathered his friends, and soon the entire village buzzed with whispers about the stranger with no shadow. The man walked straight to the village center, where Mama Ngozi, the oldest and wisest woman in Umuigbo, sat beneath a large baobab tree. She was famous for her stories and knew almost everyone who passed through the village. The stranger greeted her politely and asked for a place to stay. "Good day, Mama," he said, bowing slightly. "I am a traveler in need of rest. May I stay in your village for a while?" Mama Ngozi looked at him carefully. She noticed something was off. The sun was shining brightly, yet this man had no shadow. Her heart skipped a beat, but she remained calm. "You may stay," she said, "but first, tell me your name." The man smiled, but it was a cold smile. "My name is Zimuzo." The name was unfamiliar, and so was his face. Yet, Mama Ngozi, being cautious, nodded. "You may rest here, Zimuzo, but be mindful of our customs and traditions." That evening, as the village gathered around the fire to share stories and eat, the stranger sat among them, listening but saying little. The villagers kept glancing at him, their eyes always drifting toward the ground where a shadow should be but wasn't. By the next morning, rumors had spread like wildfire. Everyone was talking about the man with no shadow. The children dared each other to get close to him, but none of them had the courage to speak to him directly. Chinelo and Obi, however, were different. They were curious and brave. "We have to find out more," Chinelo whispered to her brother. That afternoon, while Zimuzo was sitting by the river washing his hands, Chinelo and Obi approached him cautiously. Chinelo, always the bolder of the two, asked, "Why don't you have a shadow?" Zimuzo looked up, his piercing eyes locking with Chinelo's. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a soft, almost sad voice, he replied, "Not all questions have answers, little one." Unsatisfied, Obi stepped forward. "Everyone in the village is talking about you. Where do you come from?" Zimuzo smiled again, that same cold smile. "I come from a place far, far away," he said. "A place where shadows do not follow." The children were confused. Shadows always followed people, didn't they? But before they could ask more, Zimuzo stood up, brushed off his clothes, and walked away, leaving the children with more questions than answers. As the days passed, Zimuzo stayed in the village, but strange things began to happen. At night, the animals would become restless, and the usual calm of Umuigbo was replaced by a growing unease. People began locking their doors earlier, and some whispered that the stranger had brought bad luck to the village. Mama Ngozi, too, was troubled. She had lived many years and had seen many things, but never had she met someone without a shadow. She decided to keep a close eye on Zimuzo. One evening, she called the village elders together for a secret meeting. "There is something wrong with this man," she said. "I don't know what, but we must be careful." The elders nodded in agreement, but no one dared confront Zimuzo. Instead, they watched him from a distance, hoping to uncover the mystery. Chinelo and Obi, still curious about Zimuzo, decided to follow him one night. They waited until the moon was high in the sky and the village was quiet. From the shadows of the trees, they watched as Zimuzo left his hut and walked into the forest. Quiet as mice, they followed him deep into the woods. Zimuzo moved swiftly, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Finally, he reached a clearing and stopped. Chiny and Obi hid behind a large tree, peeking out to see what he was doing. Zimuzo knelt down and opened his bag, pulling out a strange, glowing stone. He held it up to the sky, and suddenly, the wind picked up, swirling around him. The stone glowed brighter, and for the first time, Chinelo and Obi saw something terrifying. From the ground, a shadow began to rise. But it wasn't Zimuzo's shadow. It was something darker, something alive. It twisted and turned, forming the shape of a person, but its eyes were empty, and it moved like smoke. Chinelo gasped, and Obi quickly covered her mouth. They watched in horror as the shadow creature stood beside Zimuzo, who whispered something in a language they didn't understand. Suddenly, the shadow turned its head as if it had heard them. Chinelo and Obi froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. But before the shadow could move, Zimuzo raised the stone again, and the creature vanished into the night. The children ran back to the village as fast as they could, not stopping until they reached Mama Ngozi's hut. Breathless and scared, Chinelo and Obi told Mama Ngozi everything they had seen. The wise woman listened carefully, her face growing more serious with every word. "This is worse than I thought," she said. "Zimuzo is not just a man without a shadow. He controls the shadows." The next day, Mama Ngozi called a village meeting. She told the people what Chinelo and Obi had seen. "We cannot allow Zimuzo to stay," she said. "He brings danger to us all." The villagers, now terrified, agreed. But how could they confront a man who controlled shadows? That night, as the village gathered to confront Zimuzo, they found his hut empty. He was gone, vanished without a trace. But the villagers knew he hadn't left for good. The following night, as darkness fell over the village, the winds began to howl, and strange noises filled the air. Zimuzo had returned, and this time, he wasn't alone. The shadow creature was with him, moving silently through the village, searching for something or someone. But Mama Ngozi was ready. She gathered the strongest men and women in the village and handed each of them a burning torch. "Shadows cannot survive in the light," she said. "We must drive him out." With torches in hand, the villagers surrounded Zimuzo, who stood in the village center, his shadow creature looming behind him. "Leave this place," Mama Ngozi shouted. "You are not welcome here." Zimuzo laughed, a cold, eerie sound. "You think fire can stop me?" he sneered. But the villagers were not afraid. They raised their torches high, and the flames flickered brightly in the night. The shadow creature hissed and backed away, shrinking from the light. Realizing he was outnumbered, Zimuzo's smile faded. He raised the glowing stone, trying to summon more shadows, but it was too late. The villagers pressed forward, their torches driving the shadow away. With one last glare, Zimuzo turned and fled into the forest, his shadow creature disappearing into the darkness. The village was safe, for now. The next morning, Umuegbo was peaceful once again. But the villagers knew they had learned an important lesson: not all that is seen, or unseen, can be trusted. Chinelo and Obi were hailed as heroes for their bravery, and Mama Ngozi reminded the village to always stay united in the face of danger. Zimuzo, the stranger with no shadow, was never seen again. But the villagers never forgot the night he came to their village, a reminder that shadows, and the mysteries they hold, are not always what they seem. The end.